Are you wondering, do I need to take vitamins? What's the whole thing with vitamins? Why do I need to take them? Aren't I getting enough in my food? What's going on with the vitamin craze? My name's Dr. Taranella, and in this video, we're going to look at some of the things that come to mind for me, why people need to take vitamins to begin with. Most of the time, I'm testing people and finding out that they are deficient in certain vitamins, nutrients. So we talk about why that is, why you're deficient to begin with, and some of the testing that helps inform us if you're deficient, how you can look at blood work and other lab tests to determine this, as well as symptoms, what symptoms suggest you might be deficient in this. And then ultimately, what do you do when you find you are deficient? How are you going to go about getting your levels back up? If you're not getting enough through the food, does that mean you just need to take more? Do you need an injection? What is going on with the vitamin situation? So if this is the type of information that you like about health, vitamins, nutrition, click on that like button and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to get more videos like this one. All right, let's address this question. Do I need to take vitamins? So the title of this video is, do I need to take vitamins? And I chose this title because I think there's a lot of information on the internet and otherwise about the need to take vitamins, but not all of it's accurate. Some of it's misleading and some of it's actually dangerous. With that being said, the main thing that I hope you get out of this video is the important role vitamins play in our health. More specifically, I hope you'll gain a better understanding of why you might need a vitamin and or mineral supplement, who is a candidate for vitamin supplements, and how do we know when you are or are not a candidate? Where do vitamins, minerals, nutrients, etc. work in the body? And what is the best delivery form for these vitamins, nutrients, minerals? So before I get started with some of the details, I just wanted to point out that a lot of these topics can be expanded on, and think about this as just kind of a foundation. But if you do have questions about some of the specifics of some of the things that I'm covering here, just drop it in the comment section. And depending on the interest, I may do a separate video on that specific topic. Well, the first thing to discuss with the topic of, do I really need to take vitamins is the RDA. And RDA stands for the recommended daily allowance. And that comes from the FDA, and it represents the minimum amount needed to prevent serious medical issues from lack of a specific vitamin. So there's specific conditions associated with a lack of each vitamin that we know about. So scurvy for vitamin C, beriberi for thiamin or B1, and there's many others that are documented as well. So the issue with the RDA is that it doesn't account for many different variables of human physiology, and it's basically looking to prevent serious illness from vitamin deficiency. As a result, the RDA is not the recommended optimal range for health. It's the amount needed to prevent serious disease in the population as a whole. That being said, there's a lot of reasons why you might need much more than what the RDA suggests is the amount you need. This is where individual medicine comes in. So let me give you some examples. Conditionally essential refers to the body's need for higher amounts of certain vitamins and nutrients during periods of stress on the body, or during periods where there's certain physiology happening in the body that's stressing certain systems out. You may need more of a certain nutrient, vitamin, etc. One example of this that comes to mind is with vitamin C. So vitamin C, our bodies cannot make vitamin C. We do get it from food, and during periods of infection, for instance, we may need more vitamin C, or our bodies would do better when we have more vitamin C, because vitamin C has been shown to increase immune activity and shorten the duration of sickness. And so during periods of high amounts of immune activity, our bodies are burning through vitamin C at a more rapid rate. And so that condition requires more vitamin C for that period of time. If you're taking the minimum amount needed, you can prevent scurvy, but if you take more than the minimum amount needed, you can get rid of your cold a lot quicker. And there's many other examples like this. So the RDA is concerned with preventing serious illness from lack of a vitamin or mineral, and that gives us kind of a benchmark to, you really don't want to go below that, but it's not really the upper limit. It is a bit misleading to say that the RDA is what everyone needs, because some people need a lot more, as noted in the case of vitamin C, and there's many other examples of this, as we're going to see as we go on. So I have a question for you about this. Do you know if you're meeting the RDA for your nutrition intake with just food alone? So let's talk about this a little bit more. So the CDC reported in 2009 that only about 30% of people get 3 or more servings of fruits or vegetables per day. Now, we all know that this is where most of our vitamins and nutrients are coming from. Of course, some come from animal protein and different organ meats and things like that, but most of us are getting the majority of our vitamins and nutrients from plant sources. And those plant sources are what the animals eat that supply those nutrients to the flesh and protein and stuff that you're eating as well. So plants are very important. The nutrition in the plants are very important. And so if you're only eating 3 or 4 servings of fruits and vegetables, and maybe you're eating less than that, you may be very micronutrient depleted when it comes to things like vitamins, minerals, etc. The other thing to think about is what has occurred with our soil in the agricultural industry over the last 50 to 150 years. What does this do to the nutrient content in the plants that we're actually eating on a day-to-day basis? So the nutrients in the plants come from the soil, and if the soil is depleted, those plants are going to be depleted in specific nutrients as well. Now, because a lot of the new farming practices are worried more about quantity versus quality, and so they're not rotating crops properly and using the same crop over and over, is just going to pull those nutrients out, and certain nutrients are going to be depleted in that soil, and it creates deficiencies in the actual plants. Ideally, crops should be rotated to give the soil a chance to naturally replenish any nutrients that were depleted, and there's certain plants and crops that should be used to do this, and it's a very specific practice. Over the last 100 or so years, this is not a common practice, especially with big agricultural farming going on. That leads us to soil that's really depleted, and the food that we eat is devoid of a lot of the vitamins and minerals that we need to just meet the minimum amount, not to mention the need for potentially higher amounts for some of us. With that being said, how many fruits and vegetables do you think you need to meet the RDA for all your vitamins and minerals? That's a question for you. Maybe you can find out. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Now, some of us consume things on a daily basis that may be depleting our nutrient status or causing us to get rid of certain vitamins and minerals faster than we otherwise would be. You have any ideas on what that might be? So basically that's going to be like alcohol, caffeine, things like that are going to deplete your vitamin levels, nutrient levels, etc. So you might say, well, I already eat a good quantity of fruits and vegetables. I don't drink caffeine or alcohol. So do I need to take a vitamin? And that leads us into the next thing we should look at with this, and that is absorption. So depending on what you eat, you may be consuming plenty of vitamins and minerals and nutrients, but there may be a problem with that getting into your body, meaning you may not be absorbing those vitamins and minerals. So here are some conditions, digestive issues and conditions that suggest you may not be absorbing or have the best absorption to get all the nutrition out of the foods that you eat. So there are actual digestive system issues like pernicious anemia, gastroesophageal reflux, IBS, IBD, which is more Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, etc. Then there's also different functional digestive issues. So you may have done an endoscopy or seen a GI doctor and they said, everything looks normal, but there's still some problems going on, meaning you're still having symptoms. This would typically be in the IBS category of stuff as well, but maybe you have like loose stools or indigestion, gas, bloating, acid reflux, constipation, things like this, suggest that there could be inflammation going on in your digestive tract. This picture here is basically the villi and microvilli, so it's a cross section of the intestinal lining, and all these little things on the edge here are basically where the food is absorbed through that. And these can get damaged from inflammation, and that means you're not getting as much nutrients, the really fine nutrients, as it's being broken down or through the digestive cells and into your body. So, that's really important. Absorption is kind of a key thing. So if you're not absorbing these foods, you're obviously doing yourself any good by eating more fruits and vegetables. Maybe it's better than, eating a poor diet, but you still need to take care of that. It may mean that you need more of specific vitamins, nutrients, minerals, etc. Depending on what's going on, like pernicious anemia, for instance, is an autoimmune condition where your body attacks the intrinsic factor that is needed to absorb vitamin B12. And so if you have that, all the vitamin B12 going through the digestive tract in the world is not going to help you. You actually need to take injections or take sublingual B12 in that case. So all this absorption stuff is also important. That's not the end of the story, but if you have, a lot of inflammation going on, it's important to, look at that and address that, but it also points to the fact that you may need to take more vitamins. Now, you might say, you consume a good quality diet with lots of fruits and vegetables, you don't consume any caffeine or alcohol, and I don't have any apparent digestive issues, no apparent symptoms, and I've been evaluated, nothing shows up. So then the next question about whether or not you need to take vitamins is, are you taking medications, and do these change your need to take vitamins? So some medications definitely are going to increase the need to take vitamins, and it's because they're going to increase the excretion of vitamins or decrease the absorption of vitamins or increase the demand for certain vitamins in the body. So here's a few examples of that. So antidepressants like tricyclic antidepressants is a family of medications like Elavil, for example. They're going to increase the need for B vitamins, and they can also actually deplete your B vitamin levels. Diabetic medications like metformin deplete B12, probably folate as well, and magnesium. So if you're taking metformin, you may need more of these specific vitamins, or at least means you should be evaluated a little bit more thoroughly for that. Acid-reducing medications are a big one because they deplete the stomach acid and the ability to produce like the intrinsic factor that I mentioned earlier. They're going to deplete B12, but also on the absorption side, you're going to have less magnesium, zinc, calcium, folate, iron, etc. All those vitamins, just by taking, certain acid-reducing medications, are going to be depleted in your body over time. Now, if you take it once or for 2 weeks, probably not going to make a huge impact, but it's the long, insidious consumption of these that are going to, over time, deplete your vitamin stores. So if you're taking medications, it's important to look at what these medications might deplete in your body from a vitamin mineral standpoint. Or you can look at it from the other side. Maybe since I am taking medications, I should be checked to see if I'm missing something or really low in something as a result of these medications, or could be for other reasons too. But so let's say now, I consume plenty of fruits and vegetables. I don't consume any caffeine or alcohol. I don't have any apparent digestive symptoms, and I don't take any medications, or at least the ones that I looked at, don't deplete any of the vitamins that I have. Do I need to take vitamins because of genetic issues? Or put another way, do my genetics cause my body to need more of certain vitamins, minerals, etc.? So when I'm referring to genetics here, we're mostly referring to single nucleotide polymorphisms, or SNPs, SNPs. And that's basically what that means. It's a single point along your genetic code that is changed. When it's changed, that gene that it's coding for is the blueprint that then tells your body, how to make the protein. So when you make that change, it changes the outcome of the protein, and then that protein is going to be a little bit changed in some cases. If it's a significant single point mutation or significant SNP, the outcome of that protein will be more significant and change, so that it may increase the demand for certain nutrients or certain vitamins that the body needs because of that single nucleotide polymorphism. So you can think about it like this. If we have a toy car factory, or just a car factory in general, the blueprint for the car is what's being altered, and so the toy car may come out with 3 wheels instead of 4. Now, as you might guess, that car will still be somewhat functional with 3 wheels. You may have to everybody lean on one side, but it's not going to roll very well. It's not going to be as functional as if there's 4 cars. And the same thing happens with the body, and basically the vitamins and nutrients oftentimes are cofactors, which we're going to talk more about later, but they can basically help support that 4th wheel so that the thing will still work, just not going to work as good. So why we care about this is that we can support the enzymes with nutrition when those enzymes or proteins that are functioning in the body are misshapen due to our genetics. And this is kind of a newer field called nutrigenomics, and it's basically the use of nutrition to improve your health based on specific genetic alterations. So one example of this that many people maybe have heard of is the MTHFR enzyme. So everybody has MTHFR as an enzyme functioning in our body. That stands for methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase. And this enzyme basically turns different forms of less active folate into more active folate. And when you have an alteration in the MTHFR enzyme due to one of these single nucleotide polymorphisms, it can reduce the functionality of that. A lot of people do have this MTHFR alteration. Some say as much as like 50% of the population, but not all of the alterations are as significant as the other ones. So maybe somewhere around 33 or a third percent of the population have moderate to severe MTHFR, which is, quite a bit. So with MTHFR, one of the most common symptoms that people will have is fatigue, depression, kind of mental health things, maybe even anxiety, and also more prone to blood clots, and that's thought to be related to homocysteine. So that's one SNP. There's also one known as COMT, and COMT stands for catechol-O-methyltransferase, and this enzyme facilitates the breakdown of stimulating neurotransmitters known as catecholamines. There are things like adrenaline, dopamine, etc. And basically, when these kind of build up in your system, you feel a little bit more stimulated, anxious. Maybe you're going to have more insomnia, maybe blood pressure issues, things like that. Even bipolar is sometimes associated with this COMT SNP. So there's many examples of these single nucleotide polymorphisms where the vitamin or mineral may be needed in higher amounts in order to allow that enzyme to function properly. But there's also some problems that can happen from vitamin mineral transporters. So the proteins that transport things like thiamin and magnesium and things like this can also be altered. And there's many examples of this where you can get them into the body, but they just can't be transported. And so those are things you can look at through doing genetic analysis and looking deeper at your genetics. Genetics do play a role in our need for more vitamins. In some cases it's very important, other cases not so much. So now back to our question, do I need to take vitamins? So if you consume enough, you don't have any caffeine or alcohol, your absorption is perfect as far as you know, you don't take any medications, and as far as you know, you don't have any genetic issues. So then the question still is, do I need to take vitamins? Well, if this is the case for you, you've kind of cleared off all those potential issues, checked them off one by one, then the question you want to consider, or maybe you don't want to, do genetic testing, etc. So one way around this, or you can do, is look at, do you have any signs and symptoms that may suggest you have a vitamin deficiency? Now, of course, you might be asking, well, why can't I just check to see if I have a vitamin deficiency? And the reason is, yes, you can test for those things, but you may not catch all of the issues that may be occurring. So like in the case of transport issues, you may be suboptimal in certain vitamins, certain nutrients, but when you do a blood test, it looks normal, or when you do some kind of analysis of your blood, it looks like you have plenty of that, but functionally speaking, like symptom-wise, there's something wrong, and you wouldn't detect that if the vitamin level looks fine, but your tissues are actually asking for more because it's not being delivered into the tissues, for instance. So that's where we can look at signs and symptoms that may suggest you need more of a specific vitamin. So another thing we can do if we're trying to answer this question, do I need to take vitamins, do I need to take minerals, etc., to supplement my health, is we can look at certain signs and certain symptoms. Now, signs are objective measurements like lab tests and things like this that we can measure, whereas symptoms are more subjective things you're feeling personally and can't necessarily be measured. So first, let's look at some of these signs. So for signs, we have things like macrocytosis, homocysteine, and certain vitamin levels. And macrocytosis can be observed basically a lot of standard blood tests. When you go in for a physical, you'll get a CBC, known as complete blood count, and it's looking at the red blood cells and white blood cells. And in the red blood cell part, you're looking at the relative size of those red blood cells. And when they start to enlarge, that's called macrocytosis. And that's an indicator of deficiency of B12 and folate. And what's happening there is the cells start out kind of small, they get bigger, and then right before they're ready to divide, they're in a larger state, and then they divide, basically split in the middle and divide. And part of that splitting process is DNA replicating, and it gets pulled apart, and half goes to one and half goes to the other. So that DNA is really dependent on B12 and folate. So if you don't have enough of those, you'll have more cells stuck in that larger state, and that's called macrocytosis. And there's different cutoffs for that. You use your reference lab's reference ranges for that, and you can kind of tell, if they're in the larger state like that you may have trouble dividing. Could be B12 or folate deficiency. So that test is the MCV on the CBC. That tells us that. That's called macrocytosis. Another thing is homocysteine can also be elevated when there's B12 and folate deficiency as well. Now, homocysteine can also be an indicator of B6 deficiency. So if you have a high homocysteine, this could be an indicator of B12, folate, or vitamin B6 deficiency. Now, of course, some of these vitamins can be measured directly in your blood. So you can measure B6, you can measure B12, you can measure riboflavin, things like this, but a lot of times they're not covered by insurance, and in some cases they're not very accurate. So it's not always telling us when there may be conditions where you need more of these vitamins, and that's where functional assessment comes in, and also intracellular vitamin status can also play a role there too. So there's things like red blood cell folate or whole blood thiamin, and things like this can be more useful in identifying when there's a intracellular need versus just the serum. What's floating around in the blood is harder to detect. Now, not all vitamins can be checked that way. So depending on which vitamin you're looking at, you may have to do it through the serum, and there is no red blood cell form for that particular vitamin. Now, another functional way to look at vitamin status is called a nutrient cell analysis. And what this test does is done by a specialty lab, and it's basically looking at a functional way to look at whether or not your cells have enough of these vitamins, nutrients that are being measured. And what it does is it takes your white blood cells and it puts them on petri dishes. Each petri dish is depleted in one specific vitamin, mineral, or nutrient, and then it basically puts those same cells on a petri dish that has plenty of vitamins, nutrients. See how long that one grows, see how long these ones grow. And there's also a comparison to a reference range. How long do the cells typically grow when they're devoid of those nutrients? And so there's a reference range that can be used against how long your cells grow. So if they don't grow very long, typically is an indicator that you're deficient in that nutrient, because the cells should be able to sustain themselves for a period of time. So depending on how long your cells live compared to the reference range may be an indicator of deficiency. And this is more of a functional assessment because you can see what's going on internally with your cells. So again, that test is a specialty lab test done by SpectraCell. There are other functional tests similar to that, but another functional objective measurement that you can do is called an organic acid test. Now, this isn't going to measure every single nutrient or vitamin that you may have questions about, but it can cover a lot of bases. So this is typically looking for metabolites that are going to be elevated when there's a deficiency of a vitamin, nutrient, or mineral. An example of this is methylmalonic acid. Methylmalonic acid goes up when there's a deficiency of B12 and is very specific for B12 deficiency and not very specific for anything else. So when you have elevated methylmalonic acid, it's very likely that you have a B12 deficiency. Now, methylmalonic acid happens to be something you can also do in the blood, you can do in the urine, but it is part of a broader range of tests that you can do in an organic acid panel. It's just an example of how you're looking for nutrient vitamin deficiency, and it tells you very specifically if you're deficient in a certain thing because there's a buildup of a byproduct that shouldn't be there. So those are some examples of signs. Now, we also want to look at certain symptoms. There's a lot of different varied symptoms that can be indicators of vitamin deficiencies. So you want to layer these with some of the other stuff that we talked about, as well as the signs, because they could be indicators of a lot of different things. Things like headaches, muscle spasms, sometimes those can be an indicator of magnesium deficiency. So what you would want to do is sort of look at what your symptoms are, and then what do I want to test, or what's likely going on, what vitamin deficiency is suggested by those symptoms, and then go from there. Allergies, insomnia, poor sleep, things like this, sometimes those can be an indicator of poor histamine clearance. So there could be a lot of suggestions there. Things, methylation problems like B12, folate, even B6 can be indicated there. Even magnesium can be indicated there, maybe thiamin as well. So not always very specific for which vitamin or nutrient may be deficient there, but if you layer it with other things, you can start to build a theme for what you need to test and rule out or rule in. Night vision problems, frequent upper respiratory tract infections. Night vision is more specific to vitamin A. So yes, vitamin A is important for immunoglobulins, especially in the mucous membranes. So that could be, one example of a symptom that could be an indicator of vitamin A deficiency. Sensitivity to medications, smells, foods. This is kind of a general theme of basically a toxic overload. So you may need more support or nutrients that support detoxification, maybe glutathione, for instance. Fatigue, slow muscle recovery, low endurance. This could be a creatine deficiency. It's also part of a broader theme of methylation problems, maybe even a CoQ10, more of a mitochondrial thing. So you need to build a theme and then test to kind of rule these in and rule these out. So that's kind of the general idea there with signs and symptoms. So if none of these scenarios really apply to you, just remember that sometimes, you don't know how bad you feel. You may not know that you're fatigued until you feel great or feel better. So that kind of covers the why do I need to take vitamins and who might need to take vitamins. But also wanted to look at what do vitamins actually do? Where do they have their activity in the body and what are they actually doing for us? So what they do and where they do it are kind of the same question. Vitamins work all over the body and every single cell, and they basically do this working as cofactors. And a cofactor is basically a helper. So a lot of vitamins and minerals are cofactors for enzymes, and enzymes are catalysts to reactions. So they help a process move forward. So you might have like two things that are separate, and the enzyme comes along and puts them together, and you get this brand new thing over here that works totally different than the two things individually. And enzymes are responsible for that, but those enzymes oftentimes need cofactors to work properly. So basically enzymes control a lot of the biochemical processes in our bodies. They control things like neurotransmitter production and breakdown. They control things like detoxification, which helps us eliminate toxins like histamine and toxins all around us like pesticides. So if you don't have enough cofactors, you end up with a buildup of certain things in the case of toxins, or you end up with not enough, in some cases, not enough neurotransmitters, just as an example. Cofactors are also needed for hormone production and breakdown. So sometimes hormone imbalance, PMS type symptoms can occur from too much estrogen, and you're not processing those estrogens properly, and that can cause headaches or other symptoms related to hormone imbalance. Metabolically speaking, a lot of vitamins are needed for metabolism and breakdown of carbohydrates, mobilization of fats, and so if you're deficient in certain B vitamins, you may have more of a susceptibility to diabetes and blood sugar issues, and that's where also transport and genetics come into play too with a lot of this stuff, because it's not just having enough of it, but can you actually transport it to where it needs to go inside the cell into different tissues. So after getting all this information, you may be thinking, okay, maybe I do need to take a vitamin. Maybe I do need, X, Y, or Z vitamin. So if you do decide to do that, what are your options for supplementation? There's a few different ways you can go about that. So there's obviously oral, you can swallow them. And with the oral, there's capsules, there's liquid, and there's tablets. So each one of those are going to have pros and cons to it. The tablets are probably the worst version because they do have to be broken up by your body, and sometimes your body doesn't do a great job at that. Whereas the capsules and liquids are already kind of pre-ready, just a powder that once that capsule's opened, it just kind of dissolves and turns into a liquid as well. Not all vitamins are available in liquid form, so that basically leaves capsules as the best option. Now there are a lot of multivitamins and things like that that are available as a liquid as well. But they're very easy to use when it's orally administered, but the absorption isn't always great, especially if it's a tablet. But even if it is a capsule, you may not be absorbing the majority of that. And that's going to depend on your particular situation. If you have absorption issues, or depending on the specific vitamin, it may not be readily absorbable in that oral route. Sublingual, on the other hand, is going to have better absorption, but there's only a few vitamins that are available in the sublingual route. A lot of things are not, but they do have better absorption, and basically it's going to dissolve under the capillary system in your mouth. Things like B12, for instance, are very common to use as sublingual. Of course, there's an injectable as well, but you do have to deal with a needle. You're going to have 100% absorption that way, but a lot of vitamins are not available as intramuscular injections. The ones that are not, of course, you can get intravenous instead, but that's going to be even more prohibitive in terms of administering that. Most people are not able to do that at home, for instance, but you can go into a clinic and get a lot of things administered intravenous. There are some things that cannot be administered intravenously, so it's just a matter of what your access is, what the problems are in terms of absorption, how quickly you need to get your levels up, how much it's contributing to your health, etc. will determine that. But ultimately, the decision on which route to use, etc. is going to be dependent on what's going on with your unique needs. And so you need to have a discussion with your doctor and figure out, what the best option is going to be. There's some costs to consider with that as well, but there are different routes available to us. So now I want to look at some common vitamins that are given either orally or injectable. That I'm just going to make some general statements about what these vitamins might do for your body. And, they're just sort of an overgeneralization. Vitamins work in a lot of different areas. So these are common reasons that you might see them being used, but they can be used for other reasons and other purposes outside of this. And you should always consult with your doctor before starting something like this. Don't just go based on what I'm saying here. So for B12, there's many different types of B12, actually 4 different types to be specific. There's cyanocobalamin, methylcobalamin, hydroxycobalamin, and adenosylcobalamin. And the cyanocobalamin is actually a cyanide molecule attached to the cobalamin. Cobalamin is actually B12, and then there's these different carriers. So you want to probably avoid the cyano because it is cyanide, and cyanide is poisonous. So it is very small amounts, and most of the time it's well tolerated. So in a pinch, if you need it, no other form available, probably okay. But most of us have these other forms available to us, and when that's an option, you should definitely use those. The methyl is going to work more on methylation cycles and things like that. Hydroxy, sometimes we'll use that more in cases where we think there's inflammation going on. All of these are the hydroxy, cyano, and methyl are available as injections, whereas the methyl is only going to be available from a compounding pharmacy, but they're all available for an injection or intravenous, and of course oral and sublingual. But the adenosylcobalamin is the only one that's not available for injectable as far as I know. So B12 mostly going to help with like mental energy / motivation and mood related stuff. Of course, it does help with nerve conduction and things like that. The myelin sheath, it can have far reaching effects on the neurological system. So that's B12. B6 is mostly going to be more calming and help with anxiety, sleep, things like this. B6 can be administered intravenous, injection, orally, less commonly sublingual. B6 is pretty well absorbed through the GI tract, so not common to use it sublingually, but I'm sure it's available if you look hard enough. B complex is basically usually going to be B1, 2, 3, 5, and 6, and it comes as a oral tablet. So a lot of times people will have problems with the tablet if there's a lot of GI issues. Oftentimes I'll think that there's a problem internally going on. And basically a lot of these B vitamins are going to help with carbohydrate breakdown and turning those carbohydrates into energy, especially B1 and B3. B complex is available as an injection or intravenous as well. And a lot of these B vitamins are used as cofactors all over in our bodies. So it goes well beyond just breakdown of carbohydrates. MIC, methionine, inositol, and choline. This is part of a injectable type of vitamin nutrient that is called the slim shot or lipotropic shot. And basically the methionine and inositol and choline, the choline specifically helps with bile acid production. So it's sort of an emulsifier of fat. And the choline is also used for cell membranes. And so it's overall kind of thought of as helping metabolize and utilize fat a little bit better, both from an absorption standpoint and also breakdown. It also helps with detox from the standpoint of bile acids. So it's kind of given in a kind of detox, liver support, and possibly weight loss kind of thing. And you can take these individually as supplements, methionine and inositol and choline, and they are available as an injection as well. B5 is also known as pantothenic acid. It is needed for a lot of adrenal function things, so it's important for our overall stress response. B5 is also needed for histamine breakdown, so if you have a lot of allergies, sometimes that might be maybe beneficial. Magnesium, mostly magnesium is going to be helpful for things for like relaxation, muscle relaxer. If you get a lot of like cramps and stuff, a lot of times magnesium will be helpful. But magnesium is used all over the body. It can even be used for energy support. So depending on what you have going on, you may want to look for magnesium deficiency. Vitamin D, of course, is used for bone health, and now these days it's known more for its hormone and immune effect. Basically has a lot of balancing effects for the immune system. So really important. Methylfolate is a form of active folic acid and is needed for a lot of support for methylation cycle, which is producing SAMe for support of neurotransmitters, DNA, energy production for creatine, and also detoxification. So a lot of uses for methylfolate, and that one's mostly going to be available as a sublingual or oral supplement. There used to be homeopathics, injectables like Engestol and Tramiel. My understanding is those are no longer available. Maybe they will at some point be available as an oral form, but when I made the slides for this, they were available. So a couple questions that sometimes come up with vitamins is, why do I need to take an injection? Why can't I just take it by mouth? And that's going to depend on, if you're having side effects, which are there any side effects for taking vitamins orally or injectable? Sometimes people will have side effects from taking oral vitamins, but not as an injection. So sometimes we'll use that as a way to figure out if maybe you do have gut issues or something like that. But you need to take an injection when we think that you're really deficient or you're not absorbing it. So those are things that you would basically determine between you and your doctor after doing some testing and looking through your symptoms in your labs to determine what the best way to fix your problem or replete your body with the vitamins that are needed. How often you take that injection is going to also depend on those circumstances too. Sometimes it could be once a month, or sometimes it's like twice a week in the beginning with B12, for instance, when there's really low levels. So side effects for vitamins can occur. It's pretty rare, and if you're taking them orally, that's more common. Injectable vitamins are less common. I've virtually never seen it, but if you do get really large doses, that can sometimes cause some issues with difficulty sleeping and things like that. So basically anybody's a candidate for injectable or intravenous, but it's going to be more common to recommend that when there's problems with absorption or GI problems in general. So now we come back to the main topic. The main question is, do I need to take vitamin? The answer is, it's in the details. So are you getting enough fruits and vegetables? Do you take medication that's going to deplete vitamins? Do you drink coffee, alcohol? How many servings of fruits and vegetables? Where are those fruits and vegetables grown? Are they grown organic, etc.? So if all that stuff is perfect, you don't do any of those things, you're eating plenty of fruits and vegetables, well, do you have any signs and symptoms that suggest that you might be deficient? And so you can get some lab tests done, you can look at some of your symptoms and see if it makes sense that maybe you do have a vitamin deficiency, and then do labs or vice versa. And we also talked about where they work and how they work and how that can inform your testing to help you better pinpoint which vitamins you might be deficient in. And then ultimately, once you figure out you are deficient, you want to choose the best route to get your levels back into the normal range. So hopefully that answers the question, do I need to take a vitamin? And gives you a broad understanding of some of the things that come to mind when people ask me this question. If you do have questions about any of the topics in this video, drop it in the comments section. There's lots of things that can be expanded on here. So if you do have questions about that, I may do a separate video or at least just try to answer your question. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you again next time.